Welcome to Piedmonters for Inclusive Education's Neurodiversity Speaker Series, Understanding Sensory Regulation in Neurodivergent Children. PI supports all students by promoting neurodiversity and inclusion in Piedmont schools. We advocate for students with learning differences and disabilities. Our members are parents and supporters of our mission. Tonight's presentation is being recorded and it will be posted on our website, piedmontie.org. If you'd like to join our mailing list, please sign up for the PIE's newsletter at the bottom of our page. My name is Fairuz Abdullah, and I'm on the board of PI, and I will be your moderator for this evening. I want to remind you to please keep your microphones on mute during today's presentations. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat. We will do our best to have your questions answered during our Q&A time period, which will be towards the end of our presentation. Our speaker will pause at some point during the presentation and take a look at your questions, so please feel free to write them in the chat throughout the presentation. So we're joined today by Leanne Bloom, who's the founder of Oak Bloom OT in Oakland. Leanne helps children thrive through a strengths-based approach that blends play, creativity, interest exploration, and mindful awareness. With an expertise in ADHD, autism, and sensory processing differences, Leanne supports children in building skills, resilience, and confidence while adapting environments for sensory and emotional needs. As both a professional and a parent of a neurodivergent child, she is passionate about destigmatizing neurodiversity and partnering with families and schools to help every child succeed. Recently, Leanne launched a podcast on Spotify called Throwing Strong Roots. So make sure that you all have a moment to check that out. In today's talk, Leanne will reframe behavior as a communication tool and explore how sensory differences can impact regulation at home and in school. Parents will learn how to become sensory detectives, such as how to spot cues for overwhelm, and building trust with your child through connection. Leanne will discuss how to use practical tools from sensory breaks to emotional regulation strategies to support your child by setting loving limits, fostering resilience, and creating environments where kids can meet their full potential. With that, I would like to welcome Leanne Bloom.
Thank you for the introduction. And I've can you see my screen okay? Okay. Yeah, so Growing Strong Roots is this podcast that I just launched this week, and it's the basis for what I'm here to talk to you about today. And that's through creating meaningful occupation, skills, and strategies, and really with the focus of sensory and emotional regulation strategies at the heart of all of this. I chose the root because it really signifies what humans need to survive in the face of all of the challenges that we encounter. And with those challenges, actually with trees, their roots grow longer and deeper. And I want that for our children. And I wanted to be able to make this for you as well. So if you have questions, if you have anything that's coming up that you want talked about, or questions about pretty much anything at all, you can write it in the chat and I can do my best to address those. I'm going to focus on the presentation for the first half of it, and then I'll kind of check in and see what people are doing and look at the questions. So here's a little bit about what we are going to learn today about. We're going to learn about occupational therapy. We're going to reframe challenging behavior. We're going to look for those signs of dysregulation. We're going to learn about sensory tools to be able to manage those different sensory sensitivities, emotional regulation tools, and then how to prevent emotional dysregulation from happening in the first place. We're going to build some empathy for our neurodivergent children, and we're going to learn how to set loving limits. So
Diane,
first
it
off,
sounds like your audio is breaking up a little bit.
let me try something different. Let me just take my. Okay, let's see if that helps. Better? Okay, great. Okay. So let's set the groundwork a little bit here for what occupational therapy is. And basically it's how people occupy their time. And that can be pretty much anything. And so then we want to tailor it into that person's age or what they want to do, what is meaningful to that person. And we want to think about how they occupy their time at school for kids, at work for adults, in the community. And when we're thinking about occupational therapy, we're thinking about the things that get in the way of being able to do those meaningful occupations. And that can be just about anything from emotional regulation to sensory overwhelm to a physical disability, a mental disability, and everything kind of in between. It's a pretty holistic therapeutic approach. And we use occupation as the means for the getting better and doing the things that you want to do. So what is meaningful to that person is going to vary. So when would you refer to an occupational therapist? I get a lot of people coming into my office these days and they're saying, oh, somebody told me occupational therapy would help with my kid. And that's great. That's a great place to start because it's really body centered. We're thinking about how that person is moving in the world and what is getting in their way of being able to access their best self. And some of the things to think about, watch out for, the warning signs and symptoms might be delays in fine or gross motor. It might be a visual impairment. It might be environmental, like from a sensory perspective, having sensory overwhelm or something like this. It could be emotional regulation challenges, difficulty sitting still, and those can all be happening in the classroom or at home. And there are adults that are tied into all of these humans, all these children. And when the adults are telling me that they're having a hard time, there's something underneath the surface, and we may need to dig a little deeper to find out why. And that occupational therapy is often the first step in figuring out that process with that family. So you may need a diagnosis in that. These are some of the diagnoses that we see that are popular in children in my practice and in schools. You need to have a diagnosis to be able to access occupational therapy in a school or a medical environment. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you. And then also that there's lots of ways of looking at these different diagnoses. And basically, I like this idea of an umbrella of it can just be any of these things. And a lot of them are spectrums. So, you know, it could be really minor, it could be more severe, and there's a lot of in between. So just keeping that in mind. So there are 3 different types of practice areas that we see in occupational therapy. There's the medical, which is typically like rehabilitation after a stroke, or maybe there's a developmental delay. And those are the times you would be seeking out medical intervention and occupational therapy. School-based is when they're having a hard time accessing the curriculum. And that can be for a variety of different reasons. And there's an IEP team that is involved in determining services, and occupational therapy can be one of them. IEP is individualized education plan or program, depending on what state you're in. And typically the occupational therapist in a school setting works on a lot of fine motor challenges. That's some of the basis of occupational therapy history is based in fine motor.
And then there's private practice, and there isn't necessarily, we're not tied by the restraints of having a diagnosis or insurance. So, but it can be helpful to have insurance and a diagnosis. So why me? Why am I qualified to give you this presentation, and why should you care? Well, I am also a parent and of a child in Piedmont schools, and I've gone through all of this as a parent, navigating the whole IEP system, and I've done it for a lot of the kids that I see in my private practice, where I've helped them kind of figure out their way in determining what is going to work best for their children. So I understand neurodiversity from both as a parent perspective, as a professional, and personally. It's a journey that I've been on for a lot of my life, and figuring out what's going to work best for myself in these different environments. And I love to play. I love to engage with my kids and make it super fun for them. I'm also super passionate about what I do. And as such, I want to bring occupational therapy to you, to everyone. I'm creating a podcast. I'm writing a book. I want to share this information with the world. And here's a couple pictures here of my practice on Grand Avenue, and some of the pictures of the kids' artwork and things that they've been working on. So let's talk a little bit about behavior as a form of communication. I love Dr. Ross Green's work and the motto that he says about kids do well if they can. And I really use that as a lens of how I look at kids, and that if they're having a hard time and they're having challenging behavior, then there's probably something else going on, and we need to dig a little deeper. They're not bad kids. It's up to the adults, I feel like, to figure out what's happening there and ask more questions. I'm also a big fan of Dr. Kennedy's work. She does a podcast and a book called Good Inside. I mentioned assessment, and just wanted to say that a little bit about that, that there may be an underlying condition, and that some of the things that they look at in occupational therapy are balance and gross motor skills, fine motor skills, and some cognitive skills, thinking skills, and some behavior things, sensory things, stuff like that. But sometimes in order to get a medical diagnosis, one that your doctor could write off on, that would require a doctor. Occupational therapists can't really diagnose too much beyond fine motor things. First and foremost, I want to mention self-care, because when you're raising a neurodivergent child, or if you have a neurodivergent child in your life, it's hard. It can be really difficult. And one thing to think about is putting your oxygen mask on first. And that's why I prioritized this slide at the beginning of this presentation, so we can think about what is important to you for self-care. And I wanted to just give us a chance as a community to just put in the chat one thing that you do for self-care. And then that'll maybe help generate ideas for what other people can do for their self-care too. And here's my little collage of some of my self-care things: music, snowboarding, biking, and a bath. So just put some stuff in the chat, and then you guys can read it. So supporting kids that are having a hard time. There are different ways to do that, and these are the primary ways that I found work the best. Having sensory strategies, having emotional regulation strategies, setting clear expectations, and having loving limits, or also consequences. Before we're working with building skills and challenging behavior and all of these things, we have to start by building a relationship with a person. So we connect with them with their strengths and listen to them. What do they like to do? What's meaningful to them? Asking questions. It's a little bit of an interview process. What do you love? And that really creates trust and bond with the child. And when you see something good, praise them. Practice active listening or empathetic listening. So repeating back to the person what they're saying, like, oh, this feels hard. You can literally just say, it sounds like this is hard. So, make sure that you're listening to them, and that makes them feel heard and seen and understood. And then they'll be more likely to trust you and engage with you and then thrive. When working with a kid, I like to set expectations kind of first as well. Like like even in this presentation, what are we going to learn today? When are my questions going to be answered? How long is it going to take? Am I going to be able to go to the bathroom? Yes, and yes. So by telling you all these things, I'm priming you and I'm preparing you for these various transitions, how long something's going to take, and be able to predict what to expect, and teach what's coming next. And you can do that by showing them a visual schedule. You can tell them, or you can gesture to them. Sometimes I use timers that have like a clock. You say, okay, we're going to do this for 20 minutes, and then we're going to do this other thing. Like first we're going to do that, then this. And that can really reduce anxiety. A lot of the kids I work with have a difficulty with transitions, and that can be a transition of any kind. That can be a transition from the car to the house. It can be a transition from the bath to the towel. It can be a transition from home to school, from recess to the classroom. So having predictable transitions and what they can do during those transitions, sometimes having a tool during this time can be helpful as well. So we're going to learn a little bit about how to become a sensory detective and identify the triggers that a child is having, and noticing their body language. What are their nonverbal cues? What are they responding to? And then that really teaches them for themselves how to read their own body as well. Is their heart beating fast, slow, just right? Are their muscles tight or relaxed? How can we check in with them and then teach them how to check in with themselves? So I want to talk a bit about the 8 different senses. We're going to move into this sensory portion. And after I'm done talking about the sensory portion, I'm going to pause and look at the questions. And because I know that there's a lot of jargon in these slides, and if I need to slow down at any point or anything like that, I can do that too. Yeah, so I wanted to share with you about these different senses. You know about the 5 senses, sight, hearing, touch, smell, and taste. But there's these 3 other senses in our world of occupational therapy called vestibular, proprioception, and interoception. Now, my graphics are a little bit funny for these different sensory modalities, but and we're going to get into what those different things are. This is vestibular, this is supposed to be proprioception, and this is interoception. When we're thinking about sensory, we're thinking about seeking sensory input. That's the kid jumping on the bed, that's touching everything, putting everything in their mouth, really exploring their world through their senses. And then there's sensory avoiding, the, not engaging, not looking, not touching, refusing, that kind of thing. And the funny thing about this is that they both can happen in the same sense. And they could, for example, for me, I like lots of colorful lights. I like flashing lights, colorful lights, party lights, all that is super fun for me. I don't like fluorescent lights. I feel like they bother me. They give me a headache, and they're just really annoying. So even with that one visual sense, and even with that same kind of sensory stimuli of light, it can be different depending on the source, the type of source. And that can be with any sensory sensation, auditory, movement, any of them. And there are implications for having sensory sensitivities of seeking or avoiding these various senses. So you heard me talking a little bit about proprioception. This is located in your muscles and joints to let you know where your body is in space. So when your eyes are closed, you can reach out and know exactly where that water bottle is that you put down. You can override your proprioceptive sense by looking and seeing where your water bottle is and grabbing it. But your proprioceptive sense will know where to move your body, your muscles, and how much pressure then to put on that water bottle to pick it up and bring it to your mouth. That's your proprioceptive sense. And it's often impaired with children with autism and sensory processing disorder, and even autism. And these are sometimes you can see when they're not like looking, they're bumping into things, or they're applying too much pressure, your pencil's breaking, you think you're just giving somebody a little, tap on the shoulder and they're like falling over. They're requesting lots of hugs and deep input into their bodies. Yeah. There are lots of tools that we can use to engage the proprioceptive sense, and that is by moving the muscle and joints, especially with resistance. So using heavy weighted things, moving with force, water, running, trampoline. These can all engage the proprioceptive sense and help encourage body awareness for folks who may be having a hard time with that sensory sensitivity, that sense. But also I teach them other adaptive strategies as well, like using your eyes to look where you're going, or your communication using your voice, like, oh, sorry, was that too hard? Or, like talking and figuring out what they need. And it could be, you can use it in schools, carrying a heavy backpack. You can, sometimes I'll give kids jobs to do, chores to do. This can be really helpful, like take these books to the library, or move these desks, or sweep the front porch. These can be helpful for proprioception. Also, just a side note, a plug for tools. I think that tools are really helpful in developing children's independence and self-esteem and skills all the way around. So just a little plug for that. And I'll probably mention it again. I also want to talk about vestibular. This is located in the inner ear there, and it is activated with changes in head position. So sometimes you see a child who's like falling out of their chair, or like needing a lot of swinging, or like a lot of like this movement back and forth, up and down. They're dropping things on the floor. They're really moving through space a lot. And that can help. It's part of the alert system. It will help you stay awake. So sometimes if you like shake your head, or you like move your body, it actually wakes you up. And so I feel like kids often, and maybe humans generally, know what they need. And so they will do it. Like I'm watching a classroom, and I'm seeing a kid like always dropping their pencil on the floor. I'm going, oh, this kid is seeking vestibular input. Or they're like tipping back in their chair and doing all this rocking stuff. It's like, this kid It's got to get some movement, some vestibular. They're seeking that out and they're needing that. So to work with that, exactly that. You get them moving, rocking, all these different things, using one of these cushions with this little doggy on it. Thought it was cute. Going, challenging the balance is a really helpful way to work with vestibular. All the pictures here kind of a little bit self-explanatory, but especially upside down and spinning movement actually really engage the vestibular. And you can also see it as that's for the seeking, and you can also see for people who are sensitive to it, they are the ones that are getting car sick, having a hard time with dizziness and movement. They don't just avoid it, or don't want to go on those rides and go in the windy car rides and things like that. Interoception. This is a newer one in the last 10 to 15 years of occupational therapy. And it was developed by an occupational therapist by the name of Kelly Mahler. And it's the internal body sense of what's going on. And coincidentally, it's related to emotions too. Like if a child is having a difficulty feeling what's going on inside of their body, such as how fast their heart is beating, or if they're hot and sweaty, or these are the kids that may be dressing inappropriate for the weather, or I'm not tired. Not understanding that the way that they're feeling, not having control of their bowels. They are having a hard time knowing when to go to the bathroom, or knowing when to eat, or maybe they're eating too much. These are some examples of interoception that may be impaired. And it's something that we can work with too in occupational therapy. So how do we do that? A lot of internal body awareness tools. So mindfulness is the most accessible out of all the interoception tools. I do a lot of like reflection type of work with kids too. Like, well, how did that feel? Like moving through space, and then checking in with them, like, well, it looks like you're really sweaty. Are you feeling hot? Do you want a glass of water? Or they're doing a potty dance and I'm going, do you need to go to the bathroom? And let's just give it a try and see. And then giving them that feedback, like, okay, when you do this thing that you're doing, that tells me that you're having this reaction, because I've seen this pattern multiple times. For example, the potty dance. When you grab this part of your body and you're doing this kind of dance, that tells me you need to go to the bathroom. And anytime you do that, you need to go to the bathroom. Just do it. And that will teach them when to go to the bathroom, for example. This oximeter that you put on your finger that you do in the doctor's office. I have one of these too. It's a sweet little biofeedback tool where I'll have them put it on their finger and see what their heart rate is. And then they go and jump on the trampoline. Because when I ask them, well, how's your heart feel? How is it feeling fast? How do you feel? Oh, I'm feeling good, fine, and then you put the heart rate monitor on them and they go jump on the trampoline, they come back and put it on again. And it's like, oh gosh, look at that, it jumped. Now your heart rate's over here. And now let's bring your heart rate back down. Let's take a few deep breaths, and then starting to control, you can control what's going on the inside of your body, the way you feel, how fast your heart is beating. So starting to teach these kids a little bit more about their internal body sensations. Next, I want to talk about tactile tools. I find that these are super great for stimulating the brain, touching things. And it's also just like a good break too. So sometimes it's just taking a break entirely from the activity and doing, some Play-Doh, or doing some kinetic sand here. I've got some flip sequins. I have a pillow at home where when we're having hard conversations, we all have this pillow and we're like, doing the flip sequence. or if you're at school and you're trying to concentrate, you see those kids that are kind of fiddling with things. Sometimes it's helpful to use a fidget that's intended for that particular purpose, that tool. And then, share with them too, that it's a tool, not a toy, and that there's a difference. And so they may need to get their wiggles out first with the tactile tool prior to using it as a tool. I'm going to pause right there before we get into emotional regulation things and just see where we're at with questions. And I'm going to stop my screen share for just one moment because I want to look at the okay, what is your knowledge regarding a gut-brain dysfunction? It's a little bit out of my area of expertise as it relates to occupational therapy. I read a fascinating book by Dr. Lisa Feldman about emotions, and her research was all on the brain and how, so I would recommend that book. It's called How Emotions Were Made, and maybe that as a resource. So the brain is the one that's most responsible for all of your emotions in this research. However, I will say from personal experience that my gut tells me first before my brain tells me something is going on. So I very much listen to my gut and what your gut instincts are. And I actually teach that to kids too, that their gut is like, how do you feel icky? Does that give you that icky feeling? Like when something weird or bad is happening, the uh-oh feeling, I call it. And like to listen to that. If you ever have that feeling, like tell an adult that you're having that feeling, because that's telling you something. But that can be different in different cultures. I found that fascinating. So I'm going to go ahead and reshare there, unless anybody else has any questions. And then if you do, feel free to put them in there and I'll address them towards the end. So emotional regulation. There's a lot of different kinds of emotional regulation strategies. And it's interesting talking to another parent, like, I didn't even know that occupational therapy would address emotional regulation. Well, really thinking about how it impacts function. And so when we're thinking about these strategies and how they work, can we get a child to be able to function better doing their occupation, whether, school, home, community, play, so sibling relationships, all of that. If so, we can bring these different tools in to be able to help strengthen those areas of occupation. So one way to do that is by learning about emotions. I love reading stories with kids to teach them about all the different emotional words. And my number one go-to strategy for emotional regulation, but even sensory regulation, is movement. I think that movement is super valuable. Try to move every day as much as you can. Take breaks, take brain breaks, take movement breaks. Having an area where you're not moving, a calming corner, or maybe it's just a quiet space that you can retreat to. And this, this goes for adults too. It doesn't have to just be children. But in the classroom, they can have a calming corner. I took a picture of a classroom where they had a book, and this particular one was like a peace corner. And then it was one way that kids could actually interact with each other too, and share their grievances and things like that. taking a sensory break. And movement can be part of that sensory break. It could be a tactile thing. It could be a run around the block thing. It could be taking a sip of water or taking a break of any kind. And some of the work that we do together with in occupational therapy is with the client is figuring out what their list of tools are for regulation. So it's different for everybody. But I find that really talking about their feelings, knowing what they're feeling, is super helpful. So if they know, they have the language to communicate what they're feeling, and then have the internal body sense of what that feels like in their body. Maybe they have some scenarios, we can talk through those. But make a habit out of talking about those feelings. And one way to do that is with like family check-ins or emotion check-ins, where you say like, how are you feeling today? And from a chart, you can use a visual of what that could look like too. And so, yeah, so finding a way to make these sensory breaks a part of the routine that happens every day. Whether it's having a place to push off against the wall to move and do some wall push-ups, or having a TheraBand around the chair. These are great for in the classroom sensory breaks, going outside, going on the way home from school, stopping at a playground and getting the wiggles out before going home. And touch, hug, and connection is another wonderful way to take a break. So we want to have a sensory rich lifestyle, whether it's with movement and proprioception, really finding ways to embed this into your life so that it feels manageable and good, from all the different sensory pieces, but also the emotional as well. So we're going to talk a little bit about when there's challenging behavior, and when somebody is having, has a sensory difference or sensitivity, or maybe it's an emotional sensitivity, or both, it's super helpful to know what to do in those situations and how to prevent it. So first off, being clear in the expectations. So if you have an expectation that they get their homework done when they get home from school, before screen time, my expectation is that you get your homework and we check it on Schoology before you're doing anything that's related to a screen or gaming or something like this. Empathy and grace when the emotions are raging and are having a hard time. I hear you. And it sounds like you're feeling frustrated, or you're mad, repeating it back verbatim what they're saying. And validating their feelings in that, and giving some grace as much as possible. Sometimes there's a consequence when there's big feelings too. So there is, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. And then affirmative language is saying what you do want, from the behavior. Like, I would love it if you put away your dish into the dishwasher. I like the way you cleaned up after yourself after breakfast this morning. I see this a lot in classroom management too, with teachers. They'll say, I like how Johnny's sitting quietly. That kind of thing. It's kind of pointing out the praise and what you do, the behavior that you do want to see. And so when they may be having some feelings, I call it the loving witness. They're the feelings that may be a bit more loud or destructive or something. It's like, okay, yes, we can witness that and be a loving witness and to it, and let them feel their feelings throughout it. One thing to be mindful of is of the sensory input, right? These kids are often very sensitive in their sensory, in their feels. And by adding more senses, more sensation to their overwhelming experience, can be overwhelming. So one way to pull that back is to be quiet and let them just have their feelings and just be there as a loving witness, kind of like, yep, this is hard, or just not even saying anything at all, just being there, and witnessing their feelings with them, and staying as much as you can regulated throughout. And then it's sometimes like, yes, and we still need to do this other thing. Like, I know that you don't want to do your homework and it feels really hard, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it together. Maybe we break it down into steps. Maybe we just do the first problem. We're going to do this, and maybe setting the expectation back a bit, like just giving them a little bit more grace, because they're sharing that things are feeling hard for them, and trying to listen to that and respond to it in a way that feels loving, while also giving yourself grace as well. Emotions are contagious. And sometimes as an adult, we just, and as a parent, I should say, of a child who's having big feelings, it can be triggering and hard too. So sometimes we have to give ourselves grace and take care of our own needs, maybe give some space. Like, I see you're having some feels about this. I'm going to take a break and I'll take a few breaths, something like that, get a cup of water, whatever you need to do. Sometimes it's go outside and change the situation and come back and be more calm about it. That also will model good emotional regulation too. So how do we build all this confidence in these kids? Well, we'll start by building the relationship first, having some place to start with a child, and knowing what they're good at and what their strengths are is a way to help them, guide them into doing hard things. And doing hard things is actually really great for kids. And it's also really hard for kids too. So we have to try to be a loving witness in those moments as much as possible too. Doing interest-based activities. These are the things that they like to do, such as, and making it like fun for them while they're doing the skill. So it could be a building project, it could be a cooking project, these different things, and kind of build on their interests and help them grow in that way. Model the behavior that you want to see, talking a little bit about that, like taking a break and taking a moment to regulate yourself and then coming back to it, or stating your own feelings about something. So you might state, I'm feeling frustrated about this and I'm going to take a break. Allowing the do-overs, like maybe they threw their math book down on the floor, which they're frustrated with the math. Like, okay, let's try that again. Like, we're going to take it from the top. We're going to start homework. Ready, set, go. And let's try it again. And, maybe we need to adapt it in some way. Maybe it's feeling too hard, or maybe we need to do the do-over slightly differently. And then feedback about what you're seeing in the child. So like that will help with the interoception piece of it as well. Like, it looks like you might be feeling frustrated. And when you know the child and you know what their kind of go-to behavior is when they are feeling these different feels, you can say, like, you can tell them exactly what you're seeing and see if they have more insight on it. For example, you could see a child who's looking away, and it's like, oh, is this not interesting to you? Or are you not, are you bored? Are you tired? You know, those kinds of things. I see you looking away. And that will help them understand what's going on for themselves and maybe be able to move past whatever they're feeling in that moment. So preventing some of this behavior at home can be relationship building with family. I love family meetings. At our house, I have been doing this complaint to clock thing where we all sit down and talk about our grievances, and it's kind of a structured way of talking about it where you know, if somebody's complaining a lot, they can save it for complaint to clock, and that goes to the adults too. Like I'm not available to like really give this my full attention right now. I'm cooking dinner, and I'll come back to you with that. One way to get people talking and engaged is with this rose, thorn, bud. It's like a check-in that you could do at dinner or on the way home from school. What's one thing that you're grateful for today? And what's one thing that didn't go so well today at school? And then what's one thing that you're looking forward to? That's the bud. And then so you can each talk about that, and then that gives it a little bit of a structure to how to talk with each other and share about your lives, and an opportunity to open up if things were hard that day. Knowing the expectations, talked a little bit about that too, like where you have a certain expectation and routine that happens, and being as much as you can, being consistent and predictable will help with preventing challenges. Again, movement, get your body moving. Walking, running, classes, whatever, you know, just if you can build it into your life. Like I have my kiddo walk to school in the morning and home. And as much as I can, try to get them out of the house. Got to get out of the house for like an hour on the weekend and just be out doing something. Chores are a way of building resilience, and having household expectations is a way that they'll build the skills and resilience as well. Saying what you do want, mentioned that a bit too, but it will really prevent anything from happening, like having that affirmative language. Like, you know, I love it when, you know, you come home and you put your backpack on the backpack hook, that kind of thing. Having those emotion check-ins. How did it go today at soccer? Really specific, you know, not, you can say like, you know, how did your day go at school? That's fine. But like, but a lot of the kids that I work with, they need a bit more context, and, you know, because they're like, I'm fine right now. But like, how was lunch today? How did it go at the club? Or how did it go with math class? And, you know, some of these areas that might be challenging for them to be able to have an opportunity to talk about these different things and problem solve around it. Having a space in the house or home that is a safe space, like a little chill space, is ideal. Even if it's outside of the home, that could be okay too. A little tree house, or I don't know what, just a space to chill, even if it's like in a, you know, tent or something. I have like a little pop-up tent that we use sometimes. All right, so let me pause here and see if there are some questions.
We do have a question in the chat. It is, any advice on how to balance boundaries with loving witness during dysregulation with disrespectful and ugly words?
Okay, let me just see if I can see it too. How do you balance how do you be so can you repeat that again?
Any advice on how to balance boundaries with loving witness during dysregulation with disrespectful and ugly words?
Oh, with disrespectful and ugly words. Yeah. Setting those expectations actually before that happened. So like, it's not okay to say those words in our house. We have rules, and they're, I like to post them even if possible. Like, these are the rules of the house. We show respect for each other, and part of showing respect for each other is to be not use unkind words, and as you know, ugly words kind of fall into that category. And so, and that can happen with dysregulation, right? Like they're trying to find a way to get your attention and really show you that I'm real upset. And I'm gonna poke at the thing that I know is gonna be triggering for you. And it's really difficult to stay grounded in that moment and show a loving boundary. One way that I would do it and have done it is I get real quiet and I go up to them and I get kind of right in their face. And I said, that is not okay to say. That is never okay to say in this house. Do you understand me? And there will be a consequence for that. And I'm real serious. And okay. And then they feel that. They feel your intensity and they feel that directness of communication. It depends on the age level to a degree, on how you communicate that, but sometimes it's even just a look that you can give your child that tells them everything you need to say, like, not okay. And sometimes that means I'm going to take a break because I'm very dysregulated and I need to get calm in order to be able to provide the discipline that is needed. And by the way, discipline is Latin for to teach. And I feel like discipline is important for kids, and consequences for their behavior. And so you can come up with those consequences prior to when the challenging behavior happens. So for this kind of offense, it may be more chores. I love that one for my house because it gets stuff done. It feels like hard work. And often for me, it's because of hard work that the words are coming. And so I would also dig deeper too. And like, well, what was the reason? What was the antecedent, they call it in behavior, for when that happens? So knowing what that is helpful as well.
Right.
Yeah. So then they get into a whole like shame thing too. And I talk about it and we talk about it afterwards. And there's just there are consequences to these different things. Yeah.
Right. Our next question is, any advice for managing siblings who may not be neurodivergent, but in the mix and affected by the constant dysregulation?
So the siblings are disrupted by dysregulation. Am I understanding that correctly?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it can be super dysregulating for families and parents when siblings are bickering and that whole thing too. I would want like to know a specific example if they can write back on like what was happening, like if because siblings, so I'll also give another book reference. Siblings Without Rivalry is a book that I've read on sibling rivalry. And what I learned from it that I found was really helpful is that there are certain equality that isn't happening with each child. And so one will get kind of jealous of the other one. And so we're teaching each child that there is a difference in the way that we're treating each child. So one child who's bigger and just had a big workout and everything, maybe they're having a bigger portion on their plate. And then the other child's like, well, I didn't get that big hunk of, meat or whatever it is. So, talking through some of those different things. So if they have like a example, that would be great.
One of our attendees had a comment. It has worked for us also to do what you were saying and also say clearly but kindly, I don't think you meant to speak to me that way. Let's try it again because your words hurt me. So I just wanted to like share
That's
that.
super great. And also one thing I wanted to add on to that too is sharing how that feels to the child. Like that hurts. That I don't think when our words are weapons, and I don't want to feel this way, and it feels terrible. Yeah.
Okay, so our next question is, how do you help a child who almost refuses to help themselves? For example, a child who you suspect is probably hungry and is showing dysregulation, but refuses your offer of food or snacks. Like you suggest a sensory-based tool, but they refuse because they're too dysregulated.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so sometimes it's just leaving the snack out and letting them come to it on their own when they are regulated. Having a different approach to get into their body, that can be helpful, even though that the snack can be at the center of it. Let them have their feelings, like validated if possible, but like, here's the food and this is what's available. And I'm kind of leaving it at that. And it's kind of like leading the horse to water kind of situation where you leave it available. And then when they're ready, they can come and get it. It does depend a little bit on age. My son does this too. And I find that initially when he was younger, he had a harder time with it, but now he still has a hard time with it, but he'll at least come back to it. Like I'll leave it out and like, this is what's available. And he'll, when I'm not looking, he'll come back and snap it up and, take me up on the recommendation of having some food. But getting into your body is a really great place to start too. So if they're amenable to changing their environment by taking a couple deep breaths outside or doing something else to kind of change the channel and then coming back to it can be helpful.
Okay, so our next question is, in the example that you gave about using a stern voice, we have found that adds gas to the flames and ups the dysregulation. Wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Sometimes it's waiting until the gas is kind of run out of the tank before using the firm voice. Sometimes it's a little planned ignoring and letting it run its course and then coming to him or her or them and saying it in this stern way. And sometimes that adding the gas to the flame, it can be appropriate. I say this with caution because there are instances where you have to kind of feel it out. I can't say like it's universal, and it is kind of case by case basis where you have to kind of feel it out. What's their body doing? Are they still ramped up and ready to go? Or are they started to relax a little bit and they're like lying on their back? I'm really looking at it. Oh, I wanted to mention this too. It's kind of like a dog. If you see a dog that's growling and upset and his haunches are all high and he's like, that's not necessarily the time to be shouting at the dog who's feeling aggressive because, the dog could bite you. Similarly with humans, we kind of want to approach the animal, which we are all animals, in a way that is going to be calm and kind in that moment. And sometimes it's just getting down on your hands and knees and holding out your hand like you would a growling dog, and wait for the growl to kind of subside and check your own feelings. Like, how did that feel when, a child is saying this, doing this, that's out of line? We have to kind of check ourselves too in that moment. Get regulated, make sure your oxygen mask is on, and to be able to move through and be able to apply the discipline in the correct amount of force for the time.
All right. The attendee who'd asked a question about the sibling wrote back. She said, yes, there's definitely sibling rivalry, even negative attention. In an effort to course correct some of the disruptions with one child, it's still attention. So, but to your question about giving an example, bedtime routine. We have a routine, we follow it, but it can still be a ripe time at the end of the day for arguments and defiance. The siblings share a room, and so the arguments affect the younger sibling as well. Some nights we're better at taking space, giving love, etc. But some nights it's simply one thing after another. Interesting point about some efforts giving gas to fire.
Yeah, right. And so one thing I recommend, and this is really the kind of a situation where I kind of want to like talk to them a bit more and uncover like what the bedtime routine is like and what's kind of what the triggers are for these various things. And is it because they're just tired? Is it just the transition at the end of the day? It's difficult. What exactly are they arguing over? But sometimes I'll recommend that parents put their kids together at different times so that one kid can go to sleep first and then the other kid can go to sleep after that. Or if you have one kid that can like read in bed and like getting them in bed first, like you're giving an attention, like you can give one-on-one attention in that instance where they're bidding for your attention and they're, kind of going like this. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to give this person attention for the first 15 minutes, and then I'm going to give this person attention for 15 minutes. And can you break up the amount of attention that you do? Can you do 15-15 and then go back to 15-15? Or does it have to be 30 minutes, 30 minutes? Or do you do 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes? I don't know what would work best for you, but so that the child knows that the attention is coming back to them, so that they can feel calm in that, like, it'll be my turn too soon. And while I'm waiting, I can do this fun activity that I like, which is snuggling up with my book or my bear or whatever it is. Maybe the other one's getting their teeth brushed, their jammies on. I don't know what their different areas of weakness or strengths are. So using their strengths and their weaknesses as a gauge for whom you're giving attention to and when.
All right, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Something that we talked about when we were prepping for this section.
Yeah.
I just want, there's people that have their kids who get OT at school, and there's a certain thing that happens at school, and a lot of that OT is designed to help their child function at school. But then there's this whole other world of OT that helps with their overall life, but sometimes there's not a connection. Like, how do you know if you're that parent who's going to school, getting school OT, but then you need some additional help? Like, what should that look like? Or what are the signs that, yeah, my child is getting all this OT to help them with X, but things are happening at home?
Yeah, I get that. And to be clear, like a school OT is going to work on IEP goals or accommodations for helping them thrive at school, not at home. So that's their job, and the reason why they're getting school-based OT is to do a school-based occupation, which is being at school. So if the challenge is happening at home, then the challenge would need to be addressed at home with and whomever. Sometimes it's an occupational therapist, sometimes it's psych, sometimes it's getting them another approach too. But that's that. Sometimes when people are getting occupational therapy, either at school or even medically, like at Kaiser or something like that, they still may need it at home. So it doesn't really see all the occupations at home unless you're seeing a private OT. And the private OT will really work with, or private practice OT will work with you on your goals as a family, and what the challenges are that are happening at home. That's the
So
difference.
how do people start the assessment process? So let's say I have this feeling, okay, my child needs occupational therapy. Do they call a private OT directly, or do they go through their primary care doctor or other physicians?
Sometimes it depends, but they can start with their primary care doctor and get potentially a subscription for occupational therapy, and they can refer you to an occupational therapist. Often doctors will have like a list of therapists that they like or places that they know about to check out, just like you would for like a physical therapist or something like that. When you go to the doctor, even as an adult, right? You're like, oh, I got like my shoulder's not working right or something. You go and you're like, my shoulder's not working right. And they're like, okay, well, you need to go see a PT. Same kind of thing for OT. You go to the doctor, my kid's not going to bed when I tell him to go to bed, and there's all these problems and we're fighting, and or something like this. What do I do? I heard occupational therapy might help with this kind of thing. Should I go see an occupational therapist? And they could hopefully refer you to an OT, but also it depends on your insurance. I know it's a little bit more nuanced, but it's like if you have insurance that will cover occupational therapy, sometimes it's in-house. If you have Kaiser, often, unless it's a medically based reason for needing occupational therapy, like you just broke your head or something, then they'll give you some OT. But often they won't do it for sensory processing or emotional regulation. But if you have like other types of insurance, like Blue Cross Blue Shield or Cigna or various things like this, then you can go to your PCP and ask for a referral and potentially a diagnosis if you're paying out of pocket for an out-of-network OT, such as myself. Sometimes if you have your doctor give you a diagnosis code, even if it's a temporary code, like emotional challenge at childhood or something like this, then for childhood problems, I think is one of the emotional codes or one of the diagnosis codes that they can use. Then I can put that on, say, an invoice, and you can submit it for reimbursement to your insurance. Some people just go straight away to an OT. They're like, I heard OTs help. Let's get some help. And away we go. You don't need to have a diagnosis. You don't need to get an assessment, anything like that. Sometimes I'll walk you through that process. Like, okay, well, what's going on and what's causing the challenge, right? Like what's underneath that, so maybe it's, a communication delay, or maybe it's a fine motor delay, or who knows what, there's a whole list of things it could be. And so it's kind of figuring out with the family, and often the family knows what's going on, like what their challenge is. Sometimes they don't, but they're there because they want some support. And definitely an OT can help with that.
Right. This question came in the chat, which is something you and I talked about during our prep as well. How do you know a child would need OT versus behavioral therapy, play therapy for emotional regulation? I currently have a child with no diagnosis, but we deal with a lot of things discussed here tonight at home. At school, things are fine.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's kind of like digging it. Like what happens a lot with the kids that I work with in my practice is they're holding it together all day at school, and then they unleash at home. And it's like, okay, and how long has this been going on? Has it been going on for a long time? Is there been an uptick in the behavior? Sometimes it's a little bit of a nuanced response. But it depends sometimes on the practitioner. Like there are certain occupational therapists that don't have this level of like background in, say, sensory or emotional regulation stuff. They're like, I do fine motor, and that's what I was trained to do, and that's what we do. And so it is a little bit of like, figuring out which OT is going to be best for you. Just like physical therapists, there are certain people that just do osteo stuff, or there's OT that's, or PTs that just do like gait training and things like this. Same thing with occupational therapy. We are like, we specialize, we find these areas that we like and are interested in, and we dig in. So it kind of is a little bit of digging on your part on like what's going to work best for you and your family, and then like what your doctor or insurance might cover, or if you just want to start seeking help, like occupational therapy can be a really good place to start. But also behavior and psych, and there are other various other skilled professions out there that can address it. Same thing with play therapy too. And just like you would for an OT, you'd look around for a play therapist who is skilled in dealing with emotional regulation or things like that. But the difference with between occupational therapy and say a play therapist is we're doing a lot more of the interoception stuff, where we're like doing some like what's going on in your body and like the tool that is going to help you with that. Like it's sometimes and it's an adaptation, and it's a little bit holistic in nature. We're like, oh, well, what's the environment at home? What's the environment at school? What's the reason behind it? So like asking these kinds of questions and digging in deeper to see like, well, is it appropriate to do an OT kind of route, or is it more appropriate to do psych? And so when clients come to me, they fill out an intake form, and that helps me identify how to guide them through it. And sometimes they will stay straight up to them. I'm like, I think that this is out of my wheelhouse, and I would refer you to psych. Or I think we could try OT for the first couple months, 3 months or something like this, and see if we get somewhere, and then maybe transition into the psychotherapy practice.
Great. Okay, another question in the chat. After school, aside from a few after school activities that we have, my kiddo really doesn't want to go anywhere but home. He's pretty tired from school, so it's hard to get lots of movement out of him, especially if it means going somewhere like a park. Wondering if you have ideas for getting movement out that's accessible within the home.
Yeah, it depends on the home, but like, is there a rough and tumble play that you can do? Is there an outside area you can kind of romp around in? Is sometimes it's kind of just could be doing some movement and chores, working together in the kitchen, getting some sweeping, or standing up, being on your feet, doing different things. Could be, and sometimes it's doing it with them. Sometimes just doing like asking them to go out and do stuff is like, no, I don't want to do that. Like my kid's that way too. Like we get home and that's that. It's really hard to get them out. But if I say, this is what we're doing, like I've set the expectation, like I know this is good for your brain and your body. We're doing this, and we just make it a habit of doing it, and we do it together. That is much more successful. We live near the rose garden, so it's like, okay, we're doing our rose garden steps, and we make it fun. We put some music on, and we're running up and down those stairs. We're going to do 5 sets, and we're going to have a good time. And we can bring a buddy with us, to try to make it as fun as possible. Yeah. So
how do you advocate for your child with the school? Let's assume that you're noticing, you're doing homework with your kid, or, they can't tie their shoelaces, they're just tripping over themselves, or they're having proprioception issues, vestibular issues. You're noticing it, you're talking to the school's like, your kid's fine. We don't know what you're talking about. Like, how do you navigate some of those issues with your school environment?
Yeah. So similarly to the question about the home versus the school, like it's great at school and having a hard time at home. Similarly, when they're having a hard time at school, or having a hard, if they're not having a hard time at school and the teachers are saying that they're totally fine, then they might be fine. The tricky thing about school-based OT is that it has to be academic, somewhat in nature. At least the old school way of occupational therapy has to be tied to an IEP, which is an education plan. And that is that they're having a hard time accessing the curriculum. Now, why are they having a hard time accessing the curriculum? Is it, if, for example, proprioception and it's PE and they cannot do PE, for example, or, you know, they are having a hard time navigating the playground and bumping into things so intensely, or socially, is it really difficult for them? Sometimes with the social things, some schools will have lunch bunches or school groups, the clubs and various things. And so you can start with that. And often, if you really do feel like there is a problem and that the school needs to be doing something more about it, you can ask for an evaluation and they will need to respond to that. They can say no, but you can ask for one and they have 15 days to respond with a yes or a no. And then they have 60 days to provide the assessment and determine whether or not they're eligible for an IEP or a 504. And then from there, services can be determined. Occupational therapy is a related service in the education world, which means that it's tied to an IEP unless it's a part of a 504, which is kind of funny. But so they need to have some other reason, typically academic, that they're falling behind in order to get occupational therapy in school, because school is their occupation. So if they're doing okay in their occupation, then they're doing okay.
What are some resources that parents can access or look at online if they have questions about OT?
Yeah, well, I provide some resources in this presentation, and then and also I have a Google Doc that I put together of a bunch of references for this presentation that maybe FERS can share out.
Share that for sure.
And also I have on my website, I have a parent resource area that's has a spreadsheet that I created of like all the books and all the podcasts and all the things that are like related to things that I recommend for clients or people, and then I have them like split up into like ADHD or autism or behavior. So that could be something. Doing a search on the internet and talking to your friends, getting on the Facebook Piedmont families or the special need. There's a IEP one too. I'm forgetting, maybe FERS can tell us what that is. I'm forgetting what it's called. That can be helpful for navigating these different things. Yeah.
Yeah, we can, it's probably all on our website. Everyone can reference that. Okay, another question I have is, so is OT best when kids are young? What about when they get older? What if they had OT when they were young? Maybe parents, got busy, didn't follow up with it, couldn't do it for whatever reason, and now their child's, let's say, in middle school or high school. Is it too late to start on an OT program if your child is older?
Depends on what they want to work on. I would say if you're coming to me for handwriting challenges in high school, that it would be, you missed your critical period for doing it. But I wouldn't say, I believe in brain plasticity and you can teach an old dog new tricks. Certainly you can get OT at age 90 and learn new things. Always. But I do feel like there are critical periods of development, and that it depends on which goals we're talking about and how far the developmental delay is from where they should be on certain things. I don't think that, I think that with high school kids, particularly, I find that they need to be invested and want to do it. Otherwise they won't, we're not going to get too far, to be honest. But I can often see high school kids and we'll work together for a while. And even I've worked with a few 20 somethings where we put together our list of tools. They've come to me and they've gotten an autism diagnosis in their 20s or 30s even. And they're like, oh my gosh, thank goodness I finally figured this stuff out, but I have all these sensitivities and I don't know what to do. But somebody told me about OT now, and now I can start figuring out what tools I need to be successful. So they certainly can come to OT and figure out what's going to work best for them in their whatever environments they're in. And sometimes it's a different level of cognitive development, right? So we're working on different things. It might be like getting your backpack in order and making sure your homework gets actually turned in. Those kinds of things are the problem areas are a little bit different.
Interesting. Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Leanne. You were wonderful. So much interesting information. Everyone, I'm going to put Leanne's podcast in the chat, as well as a link to our website. So once again, sign up for our newsletter. You can see past recordings for past events, stay abreast of things that are happening, and reach out to us. Our email is on there as well if you have any additional questions. So thank you so much, everyone. Take care and have a great evening.
Yeah.
Thank you.